Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for making time to be with us today. As the Chair says, I'd like to explore some of the issues around the organised criminal networks behind these small boat operations. What proportion of migrants attempting to cross the Channel do you believe are facilitated by gangs right from the start of the journey in their country of origin? And what proportion do you think are connected with them once they arrive in France?
So I can deal with that, Chair. It's our assessment that the majority of the migrants that arrive by small boats that at some point in their very long journey will have been involved with facilitators and organised crime. So what you have is a network which we attack with Project Invigor, which is a quite sophisticated network upstream which brings people through to northern France. Now, the majority of those individuals at some point will touch organised crime. As they reach Northern Europe, there are opportunities for a diversification and to be handed off between groups. And it isn't as straightforward as one group facilitating them all the way from Syria, for instance, through to a small boat's departure in Northern France. And that's part of the challenge. So we attack all of that route to try and disrupt the traffickers that are moving people and the smugglers that are moving people upstream. And for instance, we have worked on cases with partners where we've been able to intervene and deal with facilitators who are moving hundreds of migrants per day from Syria into Europe. Now, by attacking that at that end, and that sophisticated end, and also working very closely with French colleagues and Dan and other UK assets, we are squeezing the problem at both ends. The real challenge with this is that you don't see a typical hierarchical, highly organised network which is responsible for a migrant all the way through that chain. It diversifies as you reach southern and central and northern Europe, and there's a multitude of options for that final leg of the journey. And one of them that has become an acute problem is small boats.
See, it sounds like quite a complex and organic network. Are you able to identify the different gangs who are operating across the entire route? And are you able to sort of trace the amounts of money they're making and able to identify how those funds move and where they come from?
So we've had some success in doing that since 2015. We have been responsible for 620 disruptions of organised crime through the Invigor Task Force. That has involved a number of arrests, 850 arrests. 350 of those arrests were upstream and were in places like Turkey and Greece. So we are doing that. We are undertaking that activity. The challenging element is the opportunities which open up as those migrants become closer to the UK. One of the things that organic network that you describe is accessing is communications via social media, end-to-end encrypted platforms in closed groups to facilitate those final parts of the journey. And that is a challenge. It's a challenge across all serious organised crime threats. And we've been very open about the level of challenge that we face from people using end-to-end encryption on social media platforms to facilitate organised crime. This is one of those areas. So, for instance, in the first 5 months of the year, we referred over 1,200 pages related to organised immigration crime to social media companies for closure. Now, of those, 578 were closed and 485 were rejected as not breaching terms and conditions. So, we were very certain when we made those referrals that there was a problem with those accounts. To see that level of attrition with not all of those accounts being closed it is challenging for us, and we continue to work closely with Europol and social media companies to maximise the impact of those takedowns. So social media and encrypted platforms and messaging is a really good, dynamic, agile way for people to move migrants between them and for groups to communicate. And those organic networks flourish because of their ability to do that.
Just to make sure I've understood you correctly, are you saying that over 400 pages which you referred to social media companies as being pages which basically enabled organised criminal gangs to communicate and to exploit people in this way were rejected. Your attempts to get them to be taken down were actually rejected by social media companies.
So if they don't breach the policy of the particular company, they won't be taken down. And that is, one of the reasons that the Online Harms Bill is progressing, and one of the reasons we have been supportive of regulation of the internet and social media companies, because this is an area where we feel we can make more of a difference.
Okay, and could you tell us which social media companies believe that people smuggling is not a criteria and criminal behaviour is not a criteria by which they should be removing these pages?
So the challenge is a breach of their internal policies, and they absolutely accept that organised immigration crime is an offence, but the level of evidence that they require for them to take those accounts down is such that our submissions have been rejected in some of those cases. It would be wrong to call out one particular company. The same process takes place in relation to all of those companies, where they look at the account, they look at their policy, and whether there's a breach of that policy or any clear illegal activity made out, and they apply a bar which isn't regulated, and make their own mind up about whether they should take it down.
So are you saying that the problem is across all social media platforms and not just with one or two companies?
The same methodology is applied by all companies, and there will be varying rates of use by criminals and varying rates of success.
No, I appreciate that all social media companies will have their own internal policies. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm quite shocked to hear that nearly half of all referrals for pages which the National Crime Agency believes are linked to organised crime which risks the lives of vulnerable people, are not meeting the internal policies of takedown by some social media companies. And I'm interested to know whether that is with one or two specific companies, or if it's a problem with sort of all of the major social media platforms that we use today.
So I'd be happy to provide you some more data and write to the chair with some information in relation to that. But I would make the point that the fundamental problem here is that they are applying their own decision-making based on their own internal policies and procedures. And we have no traction over that.
Yeah, no, I completely understand your point, Mr. Jones. I just think that the public would be interested to know and deserve to know which social media companies have those kind of internal policies which don't see this issue as incredibly important to stop. One final question, if I may. How lucrative, in your judgment, is people smuggling compared to, for example, other criminal activities like contraband or drug smuggling?
So it isn't as lucrative as drug trafficking or firearms trafficking. It is lucrative, in terms of the amount of profit that can be realised. I spoke earlier about the low barrier to entry and how cheap it is to get a rigid inflatable and an engine. If you overload that and pack that and charge people between €3,500 and €5,000, you can see what the profit margin is. So there is profit in it, and we need to undermine that profit model and change the risk calculus for the people involved in this. But it is nowhere near as profitable as drug trafficking.
And so would you say that it's the low barriers to entry that have been behind the surge of criminality in this area, given that it can't be accounted for by profits?
So there is obviously an attraction when people see success and people become emboldened and they see movements across the channel, and people will try and mimic that success and make some money. So there is an element there. But the areas that Dan spoke about earlier, and those kind of four key areas around benign weather conditions, COVID-19, protective security at juxtaposed controls, add the low barrier to entry to that, and you've got that heady mix which makes this an attractive method for organised crime.
Thank you very much.